Hi, I'm Katherine Ashmore and welcome to the Mindset Exchange. In this show, we dive deep into the dynamic world of marketing and marketing recruitment. I'm joined by Kate Boston, a seasoned marketing recruiter with nearly 2 decades of experience. Kate has invaluable insights to share. We'll explore how to balance professional job searching with personal well-being, the significance of personal branding and networking, and even the role of AI in recruitment. Plus, if you're eyeing up a career in the leisure or tech sectors, you won't want to miss out on this episode. So whether you're a job seeker, a marketer, or just curious about the evolving world of recruitment, stay tuned. This episode is packed with advice and inspiration. Here goes. Hi, Kate, and welcome to the podcast. It's fantastic to have you here. For those who don't know Kate Boston, Kate works in marketing recruitment specifically, and we go way back. We've known each other for years, haven't we, Kate?
We have indeed. Wouldn't like to say how many years, but yes, it's been a while, Katherine.
It has indeed. So I guess what I'm going to start off with is that question, isn't it? How did you get into recruitment and why?
Yes. Well, I think it was certainly not an industry I'd planned to get into. I think many recruiters would say that, although others, it's definitely a route they specifically want to go after. I'd worked in an advertising agency for about 12 years, always wanted to be in communication, loved the ideas of promoting brands, the creativity that was in an agency life. But I'd done 12 years and I was interviewing other jobs elsewhere. Same role, different bunch of people. And I loved the people I worked with at my agency. But I'd worked with this particular recruitment company, Stopgap, as a client, as a potential candidate, and they were looking. So I got into conversations with them, met with Claire, the owner, one of the toughest interviews I think I've ever had. But I actually loved the process they took me through. And every stage I thought, I can do this. I like this. This makes sense. I want to do this. And nearly 20 years later, I'm still there.
What do you think are the key core attributes that a lot of people tend to have in common in marketing, would you say?
Marketing for me, I do put creativity into that mix. I certainly put team spirit, collaboration, interested in industry, interested in business. How do we make money from this product, this service? But what is it that makes this product or this service stand out from the rest? What is it that we're offering that the competition just can't beat us on? It's that differentiation factor and communicating that to others.
Yeah, and that's it. That it's the communication. And one of the things about it is so creative. And it's also about psychology. It's the understanding of how people tick, how to get them. And it's not sinister, but it is premeditated in the sense of this is how we know people behave. We've observed their behaviors. This is data we might understand about them. And this is how we're going to target them and hope that they behave. So I think there's that element to that, isn't there, Kate?
Yeah, exactly. You'd work very closely with research companies, with the planners who have those insights. So we know we've not got a product, but we're talking to a completely inappropriate audience. And as you say, there can be some elements people consider a bit sinister. You're influencing people who didn't even know they needed or wanted this product or this service. But equally, you can be providing a very valuable product or service to people who can genuinely benefit from it. So there's lots of different ways of looking at it. But that's the thing about marketing. It's so 360 in terms of the investigation, the research, the insights, and then the output. How does that actually look? What's the show that brand then puts on out there in the marketplace? And it was that whole mix that gave me a bit of a kick. And now I get to talk about it still, but from a very different side of things, finding people who want to do that sort of thing and finding the right industries for which they can do that.
Yeah. And is that your why, would you say, for working in recruitment?
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to work in IT recruitment, for example, or health tech. I don't know the industry. It doesn't particularly interest me, and I'm not sure what I would have brought to that. But certainly for me, because I started very much in the agency side recruitment, so recruiting account handlers for advertising agencies, integrated agencies. Because I'd done it, I think it helped me better service the clients, understand what they needed. And also when I met a good account handler, I'd think, oh yeah, you'd be fantastic. You've got the right mindset. You've got the right approach. So definitely having worked in the industry for me definitely made me a better recruiter.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about what skills you need to be a recruiter, so one would be it helps to have had experience in the industry. What else would you say helps?
Well, recruitment doesn't have a very good reputation out there, does it? You're a bit like an estate agent or something, but that's definitely something. And there's still people like that out there, round pegs, square holes. That was absolutely not the ethos of Stopgap. And that, again, was a key attraction for me to Stopgap. And it's still very much how we operate. And so I think I'm a good listener. I'm interested in people, whether again from the client side or from the candidate's perspective. So really understanding what they're looking for and what they're like as a person, how they present themselves to me, the sorts of things they're saying, just joining up the dots between their approach and what the client's looking for. I don't have any qualifications in counselling or what have you like that, but just I like talking to people and finding out about people and listening to people. And then, like I say, you join up the dots. They might not know what they're looking for, but from what they're telling you, you can then perhaps create the picture, share that with them, and they'll think, yeah, I'd never have looked at that, Kate. But now you mentioned, oh, yeah. And that's when there's this moment and you get the connect. It's a genuinely lovely feeling. I still get a kick out of that. And you can really help change people's, well, if they're not their lives, then really help progress their careers, which is brilliant. And if you do contract roles, I've spent many years in the early days of my role constantly working with, when freelance was huge, permalance, as we used to call them. I could be working for people quite regularly for 3 years. They'd get married, they'd get divorced, they'd have babies, all sorts of things. And I'd be working with them throughout that. So you're almost like a colleague of sorts. So we're not cutthroat. It's not just about the money. It's about the people. Couldn't do it any other way.
Yes. And I would also say, that there's definitely a bell curve, isn't there, between those who have more of the personal touch, where they really, really think about what is it that the company is looking for and marrying it with who is the right candidate. And maybe we can touch on that in a minute, because it might fall into my next question, which is, how do you feel the recruitment landscape has changed pre, during, and post-pandemic?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, there's been some good changes. There's been less good changes. For me, I do think we were talking about this earlier, Katherine, weren't we, about how pandemic comes along. Nobody can go out and about and do their normal business. You certainly can't go into the office. Crikey, how the heck do we operate the business when people are dotted all around the country or the city where they're working? And how they managed to crack that in agency life with the creatives and the production and the studio and the account handlers, I don't know, but they made it work, which I think has been a phenomenal success. And a lot of that comes down to technology, but also, of course, the people and the team and the determination to make it work. But it's changed a lot in terms of face-to-face contact, so many more Teams meetings, people aren't spending as much time together. Certainly, I would spend a lot more time meeting candidates in coffee shops. They'd come to the office. We'd have face-to-face. I'd go to meet clients. I'd see their offices. I'd get a feel for the dynamic of the space that people were going to be working in. That has pretty much gone now. To get a client face-to-face, very unusual. Candidate coffees, a few more of those, but nothing like it used to be. Teams is a brilliant thing, but for me, it's just not quite the same. And I think that's a real shame. Marketing, it's a real team game. You're working with many other people. You're working in close collaboration. I think you need to like being around people. Teams has many uses, but I think it's changed things a lot. So I feel a bit more removed in that regard, which is not something that I particularly like. And hybrid working has certainly come out of the pandemic. And again, talk to different people. They've got different feelings about it. Some people hate working from home. Some people love it. Some people are lonely at home. Some people enjoy the peace and can be more focused. Again, pros and cons. I think a bit of hybrid working for me is the way to go. And certainly that's how we operate it. So the personal contact has changed dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. And touching back on what you were saying earlier about the landscape having changed from being more face-to-face to virtual, that's certainly having an impact on the candidates, isn't it? How are you finding candidates? What's their approach around it now?
I think when you're a candidate looking for a role, certainly if you're not working, it can feel pretty lonely. And also the way you go about finding a job these days has changed a lot. Again, because of technology, really, there's a lot more hiding behind the screen, sending emails, receiving emails, even picking up the phone. I don't think people do to the same degree. When I do speak to candidates now, perhaps they'd send an application in, I phone them up rather than sending them an email. Many of them are delighted, even sometimes surprised, to be getting a telephone call from me, which I think is a bit disappointing, really. We're still human beings. We're not just, cold commodities. There's a human being there. And whilst I won't get to talk to everybody, I try my best to talk to a lot. And again, you just learn so much more from that. But if you apply for a role direct, let's say through LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, you won't even get a response, never mind an email back. There's just that less interaction. And you as a candidate are desperate to know, was I even close to that one? What is it I could have done? What was it that was on my CV that they didn't like the look of? Or what did I not say enough of? You're just left guessing. And so you keep going. And sometimes you'll probably end up applying for roles that you're really not best suited to, but you think, well, that one didn't work. I'll just give this one another go. And that's a thankless task. And it probably doesn't look good from those who are receiving your application if you're really not suitable for that particular role. So I think it can be quite depressing, to be honest with you. And that's when I think the human interaction, we talk about AI and the huge benefits of it. I still think there's a big part for us to play within that.
Yeah.
And to help people make the right choices and to direct them in the right avenues, because you can just get a bit aimless about it and lose your focus. And it's all about keeping focus.
Yeah. And when you alluded to job seekers depression, which is sort of like an industry term, isn't it, rather than necessarily actual depression, because you are finding that you are waking up and you're so low that you can't do anything, maybe then it's important to seek support. But if you come across candidates and you can tell that they're maybe going through this, what advice do you give them, Kate?
Oh, that's a hard one, Katherine, because people cope with that situation in different ways. Some people will get quite angry. Some people can be quite short. They're frustrated. And I perhaps am phoning to say, I don't think that's the right match for you. But if I can add something positive to it, or something that they can tangibly do something with, I think that's more helpful to them. It could be someone a bit upset, a bit low, but it doesn't mean they're hurting any more than the person who's getting a bit cross. So you just have to understand how that frustration manifests itself differently in different people. And I'm getting better at that, shall we say. And again, you don't want to be patronizing, do you? Because it's bloody hard. It is hard finding a role. It's hard finding a role when you're in a job, because it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. You might be working your socks off. And it's hard looking for a job when you're not working, you're at home, you're sat at the kitchen table, you're sat in your office, you get up in the morning, you think, okay, how many jobs am I going to apply for today? So I try to talk about striking the balance between doing a professional job search, but equally you are allowed to step away from that computer. You don't have to treat it like a 9-to-5 job that you would a job. It's not healthy. It's not realistic. You need to spend time seeing other people. That's the other thing. I think you've got to get out and see other people. Go and do that bit of exercise. Go and see your friends. Make a date for lunchtime or do a walk and talk. I think go for your walk. Make sure you've booked in to call Nikki at lunchtime or, I think that's important to keep the interactivity going with other people, not just to be staring at that screen, going onto LinkedIn, going onto every company website and seeing what jobs they've got going. It's not the answer. I also say make a relationship with 2 or 3 recruiters, maybe 3 or 4 recruiters. Get to know them and they you. Keep in with them every so often. Sometimes people get disappointed if they don't hear back from their recruiter every fortnight or so, should we say. It's a two-way. I always say to please don't be afraid of picking up the phone to me, dropping me an email, giving me a nudge. That's a positive to me. I know you're still looking. You want to be nudged by me. Just keep the conversation going. And if you've got 2 or 3 of those that you trust, you can have a conversation with, then that's another approach rather than just staring at the screen all day. So it's striking the balance. And when I'm working from home, it's quite easy to roll out of bed and then just go and sit in front of your computer for the day. I walk to the office. I love walking, but when I'm not in work, I don't have to do that walk, do I? But now I'm making myself go for a run in the morning. I'm making myself. It's hard, but you always feel better afterwards, don't you? Yeah. So it's giving yourself a bit of discipline as well.
Yeah. And that's really great advice, Kate, because what I always say to anyone looking for work is it's also about getting a routine. Because if you do something all the time without a break, one's going to get jaded, one's going to get tired. You're not going to have a fresh approach. You can't necessarily be creative or productive. Correct. Or excel. And so sometimes just setting a routine is really helpful. If you find a time of day where you think that's when I'm my most clear-headed and productive. Yes. That's possibly when I'm going to be targeting my most clear-headed, poignant, targeted work, which by now I really need to be on the ball for. And then other times think, okay, what are the other topics that don't require such high level of thinking? Can I be doing them then? Absolutely. And then having time off away, because evidence shows that you're much more productive if you take time away as well as being on the job. And that helps with stress levels too. Yeah. If you're thinking about longevity, and obviously this will depend on whether you're contracting, temping, going for permanent roles. But the further you are up the chain, the fewer those sorts of roles come up. Absolutely. And this is where having that perseverance and resilience and motivation really kicks in. Do you have any tips for people on that side, Kate, at all? You're absolutely right. The higher up the food chain you get, the fewer the roles are. And you can be looking for something a bit different now. You've had a lot of experiences. You could do more of the same. But do I really want to be doing that now? I need that little twist of something a bit different, whether it's a different industry. And the problems about looking in a different industry sector, a lot of clients want people who've already worked in our industry sector, which is understandable to a degree, but also frustrating for us, for the candidates, because I've done FMCG for 20 years, Kate. I'd really love to try and get into something different. Aren't my skill sets transferable, if not my industry knowledge? You can certainly learn about the industry. So yes, as you've got more experience, you might be getting more particular, which I completely understand. I think you've got a lot more of a network when you've been around the block a little bit, and it's about not being afraid to use that network. Reach out to one person who can then reach out to another potential angle for you. Don't be afraid of doing that. I find the more senior candidates are very good at keeping in touch with me.
No qualms about giving me a nudge, and nor should they. I've got a delightful candidate at the moment. He's been working over 20 years, mainly in the agency side. He's moved up to Scotland. He's willing to work in London a few days a week. Totally flexible, delightful man. Can we crack it? Not at the moment. But we keep talking, and he's realistic as well. So you could say, well, I'll just sit tight until that something a bit different comes along. I think in these current circumstances, that's the thing to be doing. But those who are not working, maybe you need to do something that's not ticking all those boxes at the moment. And this again is where clients can be a suspect of someone, if you like, if they aren't taking a role that's typically of that seniority that they've reached. But there are all different reasons why people might do that. I think the client's main fear is they'll get bored. They'll go to something else when something bigger and better comes along. But people don't always want the next big monster job. They just want to be enjoying what they're doing and taking their knowledge and spreading that around, if you like. I'm working with a lovely candidate at the moment, and she's exactly in that situation. She's left a very big role, really enjoyed it, but she'd done her due. Now she's looking for something less intense, but still wants to bring her services and have that involvement with a brand. I think that's brilliant. And I think that's a talent to be really appreciated in a new company. Some wise thinking that doesn't need to be ruling the marketing department anymore. I think that's a really positive thing to be having there. So use your network, be realistic, look to see what really is out there at the moment. And is it that you don't always need to be reaching for the stars. Keep talking to those in the industry and don't be afraid of picking up the phone, because I still think voice to voice, face to face is the strongest connection you're going to get.
Yeah. And what you alluded to there was also when you're talking about that candidate who maybe didn't want to be ruling the department anymore, it's also an opportunity. Sometimes change or crossroads can be an opportunity to redefine how you want to move forwards. And as you say, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a different industry, but it's called really understanding your own values. What is it that makes you tick? People talk about finding your why, but sometimes people find it really difficult to find their why because their why might not be in line with their values. So actually seeking life coaching and establishing your values is often a really good place to start to think, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What do I like doing? What do I not like doing? What is it that's really important to me that I look for in a job?
Yes.
What is it that I absolutely can't stand in a job? Why is that?
Yes.
And once you've established what you really are about, the essence of what you are about, makes you understand also what you will and won't do. And also the parameters of scope. And it's quite a fascinating exercise to do if you've never done it. And I actually encourage people to do that every 6 months. Because external factors can often influence your different values at different time. Not the essence of who you are as a person, but some of your more peripheral values, where all the things that feed into your happiness can impact that, or your responsibilities or things like that. So there's opportunity. The other thing I would add to what you were saying, Kate, is when one is working or looking for work, so it's sort of like a job to find a job, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're looking to find work, you can't, as I said before, do it all day because it just gets stale. And also it can damage one's confidence. It can damage one's self-esteem.
Certainly.
So quite often, just by diarising how you're going to chunk out your day can really, really help. But do something that's important to you, whether it's learning a new skill, whether it's delving into networks that you didn't know existed, where you can find new opportunities for yourself, whether it's joining different social media communities where they're going through the same thing. So you're getting a support network. And these things don't have to cost money.
Exactly. That is one thing that came out of the pandemic, isn't it? Webinars. All these events. There's a lot of webinars that you can tap into now that, as you said, don't cost anything. And not always are you necessarily going to get a magic moment from that webinar. It's not always going to be the most exciting content. There could be some little gems in it, but equally, it's who else is going to those webinars. And then you can write about the webinar that you've been to, and then you encourage a dialogue, let's say on LinkedIn, and then other people start feeding into that. And you've got a whole new string before you know it. So that's, for marketeers, it's all about brand. And we say you've got to sell yourself, you've got to sell your brand. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is a valuable exercise. So absolutely use those online tools as well. And it will keep feeding you'll feel part of the marketing community, and you'll know what's going on out there, or make some observations that someone else sees that generates a brilliant conversation. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not that magic, but I think it's also quite an enjoyable exercise. I love looking through my LinkedIn to see what's been posted overnight and who's saying what, and then you find someone who you hadn't seen for 4 years on LinkedIn, and then you start a connection that way. It is a great tool to use, especially when you're feeling a bit remote from things.
Yeah. And also on the other side, it can also be a bit too much of a saturation. So it's about, I've spoken to people who have said actually LinkedIn is doing their head in, because all they're seeing is all these people going, I can't find work. Or not just the positive side, but also the other side. Yes. So I think it's important when approaching these platforms to think, what is my objective? Maybe spend just a couple of hours going, right, what are the latest jobs that are being advertised? How can I network? Who do I want to network with? And being authentic to yourself, because that shines through.
Yes.
And actually, the more you do that, even if it's just an hour every day, switch off and do something else.
Yeah.
It can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think less can be more, and be authentic and have something to say. I'm not really into great job, or, I might be criticized for not saying much on mine, but I try not to. I really try to use it when I feel I've got something to say or something to share, because you're right, it can get a bit too just more social media than professional media sometimes.
Yeah.
It's definitely one to keep your eye on. And I think an hour a day is a very good idea.
Yeah. And as you were saying, marketing is all about brand building as well. And if you think of yourself as a brand, especially if you do work in marketing, what would you do if you stepped outside yourself and were to market yourself? So that's quite a good exercise to do, to think of yourself as your own brand. How would you market yourself? How would you time it?
Yeah, that can be quite a fun exercise. I remember when we were doing our profiles on our website, this was many years ago. If you were a brand, what brand would you be? And I think I said, I started with Marks and Spencer's, and then it went to a Mini or something. It's not exactly rock and roll, is it? But I think we can all be very critical of ourselves. And I think that's why it's good to talk to somebody else, because you don't always see the strengths that you really do bring to a job or a company or a team. It's difficult when you live with this head every day to see what you're offering. And one of the girls at work, she and I, we get on so well, but we're very different. And what she's good at, I'm absolutely useless at. But then she'll tell me what I'm good at, which I don't necessarily appreciate. So you're right, Katherine. It is good to talk to somebody else about yourself. Some people think that's very indulgent, but I think it's genuinely got an important place to progress. Yeah. It's really important. It's really important, and it is very helpful. So I would recommend doing that. It can be a real
soundboard. And the other thing is, at any point, we're all human. And in the process, you can have self-doubt. You can lose a bit of confidence.
Yes.
And the important thing is, when you are having those days, to think back about, sometimes I've said to people, look at your CV, look at all the amazing things that you've done in your life, look at your successes, and remind yourself what you've achieved. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that again. And you're only just tapping into your potential. You can do even more. So there are various strategies one can use to keep oneself motivated, as well as thinking about positive thinking, maybe focusing on developing more of a growth mindset or a positive mindset. And what I mean by that is using that opportunity to learn, to reflect and retweak it to think how you can go forward in a positive way. But also, if you ever catch that naughty little inner critic saying, I'm rubbish, I haven't got a job yet, or I'm never going to get a job. Catch it, because often with these things, it's just a matter of time, or it's a numbers game. And you catch it and reframe it and think, actually, is this way of thinking very productive, or is it just going to increase my stress? How about thinking, I'm brilliant at this. What is my long-term goal? And maybe writing that down on a Post-it note, putting it off your screen or your laptop and reminding yourself of that goal. I'm a great leader. I'm great at marketing. I'm going to get whatever your long-term goal is. I'm going to land the job of my dreams. It's just a matter of time. And just reframing that helps rewire the brain to be more positive. And then you start taking actions that support that thinking and opening up opportunities. It's actually based on science.
Right. I think it's, again, it's the crystal ball. We don't have the crystal ball, do we?
And again, no, we don't.
No. And you talk to candidates and I said, if we'd got a job lined up for you and you knew you were starting in 6 weeks, you'd enjoy these 6 weeks, wouldn't you? You might do more of that exercise. You might go and see Rome. You'd just have more patience and be calmer in your head because you knew you shouldn't be sitting at your computer and looking for that job. But as you were saying, Katherine, you can't do that 24/7. It's not realistic. You shouldn't be doing anything 24/7. So try and pace yourself, set realistic expectations. But equally, if you lost your job and you love that job, it doesn't mean that you have to be striving to the next step up. You could want to be doing more of the same. So that's okay as well. You just then need to find it with the right sort of team that you're going to be working with, because who you work with can really affect how good you are at your job. It can really raise your confidence. It can diminish your confidence. It can help you thrive. It can energize you. So it's the people that you have around you in and out of work that can really help with your mindset as well. Don't be an island, as they say. Doesn't do to just hide away whilst you're looking for that next role. But you don't have to be the next marketing managing director. If you're happy in a certain level, that's fine. But you do need to be learning about new marketing techniques, what's going on out there, because again, technology has moved on dramatically. The sorts of roles, job titles that we get as a marketing recruitment company, we get roles we weren't getting 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, because of the technology that's performance marketing, all the technical skill sets and insights that you can get about the performance of an online piece of brand communications, etc. There's so many more roles in marketing. And in a way, once you start your job search, you might actually find some marketing roles out there that you never knew existed that are really going to pull on some of your skill sets. So it can be a really positive change that you didn't actually know things were out there.
Exactly. What I'm hearing is there are so many more opportunities and people often don't realize they're out there. But the other thing is you can surround yourself with inspirational people. You touched on the fact that there are different cultures sometimes and how that can impact people. If you are finding you're in a culture where it is a bit challenging, then spend your time with people who lift you up. So that counter affects it, because you may love your job, but you may find the culture challenging. Or you may have found that you've left a role because you didn't like the culture at all. And this happens in all sorts of industries where there can be toxic environments. And the important thing is keeping that sense of self and being around people who either you are lifted by or that you trust and are your personal cheerleaders. And that's really important when going through this process. But slightly changing direction, what industries do you think are currently experiencing the highest demand for talent at the moment?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we work in lots of different industry sectors, from financial services to charity to technology, FMCG. It's quite busy in the leisure sector at the moment, which is surprising considering the state of the economy. But the leisure team seem to be quite in demand. They've got quite more technical roles within marketing that they're looking after, but inevitably the tech space in general, prop tech, for example, health tech, they seem to be the roles that are having a real spurt at the moment.
Yeah.
It's a bit, again, as we were saying earlier, Katherine, how when things are going well in an industry, marketing, that's what we need. We need marketeers. We need to be getting our message out there. And then if the business is not doing so well, that tends to be the department that gets the redundancies first. And certainly when I was working in the fintech space last year, so I'd done some work client side, there were a lot of companies that suddenly the growth just wasn't there. And it was the marketing teams that were suffering, and some very senior people were coming my way. And as we alluded to earlier, just couldn't find roles at the same level of seniority. So I think that's going to be, I think tech is inevitably going to be up there, but I think it's going to be quite wibbly wobbly, unpredictable. Some of these companies, they grow fast as they're building up, but then they can drop down quite fast as well. So again, it's something to bear in mind when you're looking for a new role. The security of a company. Has it been around for 80 years and there's no reason why it's going to, or is it a young, energetic startup that's going to go from 0 to 100, but are they going to be able to keep at that pace? And I think that's something important for marketeers to be really looking at. And I know a few people do feel that their fingers have been a bit burnt, having gone for those growth, tech, new sector areas. Really exciting, something they're genuinely interested in, but they can have a bit of a wibbly wobbly growth trajectory. So that is something to bear in mind when you're looking for new roles, because some of the oldies are still around 100 years later. We still need our washing powder. So it's another angle to be considering, because, there's demand in tech, but it's not necessarily a steady demand as yet.
Yeah. And how are you finding AI in recruitment? Do you feel it's helping or hindering both recruiters and candidates?
We've just been introduced to a new whole CRM system here. So we had a very tailor-made system, which is where all our candidates came into. It was our absolute go-to. I always felt like a pilot in my aeroplane, and as long as I had that database in front of me, I was in control. Well, that's changed now. And it's changed to a system that never used to be there, but with all this technology, and I can speak my notes. I don't have to write my notes, and it can add people in milliseconds that used to take us ages. So I'm learning about that. It can help with speed, but again, ultimately, it doesn't change the relationships that I have with my candidates and my clients. It's still about talking to these human beings. LinkedIn has changed things. Again, lots of companies now have their own talent managers. Talent managers didn't generally exist because they didn't have the database of candidates that companies like us had. We were talking to people every day, building up profiles, building up a library of marketing specialists. That was not accessible to most people, but LinkedIn has changed all of that. So you'll have a lot more companies doing their own direct recruitment, but it also makes candidates more out there. They're more accessible to lots of different people. So in that regard, it's very good for candidates because more people can see your profile. But equally, just remember what you're posting. Just remember all different people can be viewing what you're posting. And people might be looking on LinkedIn and find a candidate, but it's not going to stop them then looking at your Facebook profile. You've got to bear these things in mind. So it can open up the workplace hugely, but it can also be quite exposing and not always in a positive way. So I think for job hunting, as much as anything else, AI is going to have some huge benefits, especially in terms of speed, but it's also going to be quite negative. So it's how much you want to be out there and how much you want to give away, I would say, in terms of how much of the technology you sign yourself up for, really. But it's an ever-evolving space, isn't it? And some people continue to be very excited by it and others quite scared. And the pace at which it is changing, if we were to have this conversation this time next year, Katherine, I'm sure there'll be a whole host of tools that are out there that don't exist today for seeking your new job.
Yeah. About a month ago, I went to this event and it was a group of different companies talking about AI, talking about what they think the future of the job industry is going to be like. A lot of people are fearful, actually, that some jobs are going to be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
But what was quite positive about that is that it cannot replace the creativity or human element that we all bring to the party. And actually, I don't know if anyone can really project that at the moment.
No.
It's going to be a wait and see. So one of the things that people were saying is actually people just need to multi-skill and they need to make sure within companies that they do keep on top of safeguarding people's personal data and being AI literate. And would you agree with that, Kate?
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I'm not an AI expert. I'm not a tech expert. But some of the things that candidates can do now, have you got Canva? Oh, yes, I've got Canva. And so you can do your metadata. And oh, yes, I can do it. I mean, and again, what some of the younger candidates have been learning just at university and what have you, which they then bring to the workplace. In terms of the creativity, I mean, you use Canva and what we can create. Of course, people are using AI to write copy, to write content. It's terrifying. I try it. Some of it is quite good. Some of it I might change a bit. Some I'll just do myself. But there's pros and cons to all of that, isn't there? And I know someone who does a lot of coding. And he was saying how some of the technology now, the coding it can do in seconds compared to what might take them a couple of weeks is just phenomenal. So, of course, there's some positives to AI. The creativity, I think there'll still be a role for creatives in there, but I think it's really going to change. And what you're saying about multi-skill sets, I think is absolutely right. And that of an account handler in an agency, for example, which is where I typically am, it's always been quite multifaceted in terms of what you do as an account handler, but ultimately it's been the organizer, the orchestrator, the diplomat. But I think that's going to expand even wider. But you've still got to be that conduit between people, and AI just can't do that, can it? So it is exciting, but it is scary because things are going to change. And technology in general, it's not even just AI. Technology is changing our lives every day.
Yeah. And I would say, and this is interesting because I had a conversation with a photographer the other day, and we're talking about how one can actually utilize it to make it something else, to be even more creative. So it's an opportunity to see it as another medium to actually be more creative. And I can see that happening. I also think that approach of needing to be collaborative, of being able to bring things together, to project manage it, all those things aren't going to change.
No.
And it's that human interaction point.
Yeah.
So I realise we've been talking for quite a while, Kate. So I think we should have some closing thoughts now. First of all, I'm going to ask you two questions. For anyone who is interested in recruitment and in these changing times, what resources would you recommend?
Okay. I went about it I knew the company. I liked the people I dealt with there. I'll talk to them. If you're interested in recruitment, then I think you need to speak to a few different companies. And the first thing I think you need to do is think about the sector that you would be interested in recruiting for. There'll be plenty of recruiters out there who will say, nah, doesn't matter what industry I'm recruiting for, I can recruit. But that's not me. That's not me personally as a recruiter. That's not the way I would work. So my advice would be think about the industries that you are interested in first. Unless you're one of those people who might think, I'm going to go to the industry that's going to be the most lucrative for me, because some people, they make a lot of money from recruitment. So yeah, choose your sector and then look at some of those companies. How do they present themselves? Often they'll be looking for new talent. How do they present that role? How do they describe that role? Does that sound like you? You can always speak to me. I'll tell you what my life as a recruiter is like. And in terms of the tools that are out there, in terms of online, I'll be honest with you, Katherine, I might have to do a Google search and come back to you on that one.
And that's okay. And then what's the last question is, and I ask this of all my podcasts because I think it's so interesting. What's your favourite book and why?
I've got lots of books. I'm absolutely terrible at remembering the names of my books, but I'll probably go back to some of the classics that I read that really stayed with me. But I always loved I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. She wrote the 101 Dalmatians. It's about family, sisters, living without very much money, living in adversity, but always seeing the positives. And growing up, she's a young girl, still stuck at home, but it's got this romantic feel to it. They live in a decrepit castle in the middle of the countryside. And it's about youth and the opportunity of what's coming next. What does the rest of my life look like? So it's full of positivity, sensitivity, and excitement about the future. And it always stuck with me. I've still got it on my bookshelf. That was probably on my list of many.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing everything that you have done today, Kate.
My pleasure. I hope it's been helpful. I've enjoyed catching up with you, Katherine. It's lovely to see you.
Me too. Take care and speak soon. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindset Exchange. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who could benefit from the advice. A big thank you to Kate Boston for sharing her expertise. See you in September for Series 2. I can't wait. You're going to see more talks from me in the next series, as well as plenty of inspiring guests. See you then.